Those areas where indigenous people used to live is where the majority of biodiversity exists in this moment. And the only way to continue with that protection is that the indigenous people continue with the same way of life. And that means that they are allowed to be in those areas that is so-called protected, because they were more protected when they were not declared protected areas. Only because indigenous people were living there. And as I said, it's because the way of life they had protecting the environment. And if you wanted to hear what I hear in the Amazon, is that one Ashwar shaman shared with us is that they are protecting the jungle because it's their house. They are protecting the jungle because it's their pharmacy. They are protecting the jungle because it's their market. Why? Because it's where they are living, it's where they are finding the medicine, it's where they are finding their food. But mainly they are protecting the environment because they are protecting the surviving of human being, not only the Ashwar people. So I think that that's why they need to continue living in the areas where they used to live to continue protecting biodiversity and the environment. I wanted to clarify that I am not, and indigenous people are not against the protection of these natural areas, but unfortunately states are giving away to private sector the control of these protected areas. And what I have been seeing is that those protected areas in private hands has been converted into a focus not only of non-protecting the biodiversity, but also bringing foreign tourists in those areas, with all the benefit for that private sector and not for indigenous peoples. And that's why I insist to the international organizations who are financing this protected area to protect the biodiversity, to see exactly to whom they are giving the money. So they need to finance directly indigenous people for them to be able to do what they used to do, but also receiving benefit for the protection of their own land. This passed through the recognition of those land and those territories, which the state has the obligation not only to recognize, but to register on behalf of indigenous peoples, to give them the registration to have not only the opportunity, but the ownership of the land that they historically have been using. And this is going to be very important because it's not going to be only for self-determination, but also the surviving of indigenous people as peoples. It's very interesting to see how states are pressuring indigenous people to allow them to protect their lands and territories, when they don't see that indigenous people have been the ones who have been protected those areas. And that's why in my report I have been stated that the protection of those areas where biodiversity is very rich has to be not on detriment of indigenous people's rights. And the other thing is that that doesn't mean that in the protected areas is going to be free and allow with no excuse or with no study of impact of mining and of course the construction of mega projects as dam, because that is what we have been seeing. And not talking about also in those areas that have been protected to create tourism for foreign tourists that are going to see how beautiful is the areas where indigenous people used to live. So I believe that those areas has to be on the hands of indigenous people to allow them to continue protecting biodiversity and not pressuring them to give away their land to create those big projects on protected areas. The other issue on protected area is to create protected areas to protect indigenous people in voluntary isolation. Why? Because it's going to be the only way that the loggers, miners, are not allowing to come into this territory, and directly with creating protected areas, we are going to protect those people, so indigenous people who had choose to live in voluntary isolation.